It's time for the Douglas Coleman Show. Mr. Smooth and Savvy is joined by guests from all walks of life, from the entertainment industry to authors to political and social commentators, the famous and not so famous, the controversial and the light and fluffy. We have it all. Now, here's Douglas Coleman.
Okay, please welcome to the Douglas Coleman Show, JP McLean. Hi, JP. How are you?
Hey. Hi. Thank you for having me on.
Also known as Joanne.
Thank you. Yes, I use JP as my pen name because Joanne has a hyphen in it, and that makes it difficult to find online.
Yeah, you end up with an underscore or something, right? Sometimes you can't even use a hyphen in places.
I know. It's true. The last thing I want to do is to be difficult to find online.
Yeah, that doesn't help when you're trying to sell a book. You want it as easy as possible for people to find you. So, you are an author. How many books have you written?
I've actually written 8. 6 of them are in the Gift Legacy series. The 7th is also part of the series, but it's a companion book, which is a retelling of the first book from a different character's perspective. And then I have a brand new book that's not out yet.
A retelling of the first book from a different character's perspective. Is that something that people do? I mean, I've never heard of that.
It's a kind of a take on a Rashomon treatment, and that is it was a Japanese movie that was the story of a murder told from 5 different people's perspectives, and how that changed the outcome, or not the outcome, but how they saw it. And so, it does. I believe E.L. James did it with 50 Shades.
Oh, okay.
Because I think she wrote, and I mean that wasn't why I did it. I did it because I was getting, after I wrote the first book, there's a character in that book that is rather nasty, and at the end, people kind of wondered what was the motivation behind what that character did. And so I thought, well, I'll tell his story, because I knew why he did it, but I realized other people didn't know. So I wrote his story, and it ended up expanding the story. And it was quite interesting to me that you can twist something in someone's mind and make it make perfect sense.
I suppose
like
if you tell us what happened, it would give it away.
Yeah, it would give it away.
Right, well, we don't want to do that. I was just thinking about what you said about telling the story from 2 different characters' perspectives, and immediately in my head, Murder on the Orient Express flashed, the movie. But I'm not so sure that I know at the end they said, well, okay, if this one did it, and then they kind of showed the process of that person if they had done it, and then in the end we know that they all did it, right? So
yeah,
but I don't know, I'm just trying to think, but basically they didn't change I don't know, it's a little hard to explain, but it's like they just recapped everybody, but you're talking about taking the story and actually changing the story to some degree, or the perception of it?
Not changing the story. Yeah, not quite. What I did was I actually took the book and I stripped away everything that wasn't dialogue between those 2 characters, and I rebuilt the story from his perspective. So where she sees him talking on the phone and thinks he's talking to somebody that she doesn't want him talking to, he's not talking to that person and doesn't understand why she's reacting the way she is. So they're the other side of the conversation, because the books are all written in first person. You don't know what the other person is thinking. So it's just the motives behind what they're doing and what they're actually doing that the other person doesn't see.
Okay. You're making my creative mind go crazy now, because I'm thinking about how I could make a film this way.
Ooh.
And weave it all together, so.
It's kind of like men and women, and that's the key here. The the book Secret Sky is written from the female's perspective, from Emmeline Taylor's perspective, and it's called Lover Betrayed, and that book is written from her lover's perspective. So it's the man versus woman thing, which I find fascinating. You know, my husband and I have these conversations all the time, and he'll say, well, that's not what I said. And I'll say, but that is what you said. That's what you meant. We have these conversations back and forth, and that's what that book is. It kind of shows that people are going to interpret what you say and what you do differently.
Well, right, yeah. In terms of infidelity, to use that as the theme,
mm-hmm.
It could be interpreted as consensual or non-consensual, depending on how somebody represented it in a film, I'm saying. And
oh, well, sure.
Yeah. So you could have it where one of the characters enters into a adulterous affair consensually, but then the other partner, the one that's getting cheated on, could be led to perceive it as non-consensual, which would cause them to, call the police or file charges of rape or something. Do you know what I mean? I mean, I think this could be done.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Okay.
And also the woman who is cheating could
deliberately
hide the fact that she's married.
Right.
You know, that's so old, that deception that is so old, and that's kind of at the key. That's the key to this story, is that's the massive deception. But there's so many betrayals. There's a fidelity betrayal, but it's a betrayal on so many different levels that it's shocking. I find it shocking, and I came up with it.
There was a movie similar to what I'm thinking of. There was a big hit called Fatal Attraction way back when.
Oh my goodness, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
somebody Turner.
Kathleen Turner.
Kathleen Turner. Yeah, that's right.
And Glenn Close and Michael Douglas.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, that was so good.
Right. So it's been done. But that's not to say someone couldn't do it again with a different story.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, interesting.
Well, they say, all the stories that have been written have been told before, so it's just a new twist on it.
Oh, well, look at it this way. If you took love as a theme and you said, okay, only one person can have a song about love, a book about love, or a movie about love, there would be one of each on the planet. And that'd be it.
Wouldn't that be boring?
And all the rest of the movies would have to be deleted because it's been done. So, I mean, how many times has love been, it's like every song, not just most of them, everyone has that theme.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, you can certainly take that. The trick is trying to find a new twist to it, trying to find something in that theme that hasn't been done before. But
one of the things I enjoyed about writing the Lover Betrayed, the Mirror book, was I didn't write it right away. I wrote it after, I think I had 4 books, and then I wrote that one. And that particular book I set in New Orleans, and I just loved doing all the research for that.
Do you have any aspirations to have your books turned into films?
Oh, God, doesn't every writer?
Well, yes and no. I mean, I've met a couple that said no. So.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
No, I as a matter of fact, people email me and say these books should be in film. Okay, please let somebody who can do something about that know, because, yeah, they would make great films. You need a lot of green screen, but they'd make great films.
With the film, it all comes down to budget, and it comes to, there's lots of parameters there for the film. And then the ones that said no to me, it was kind of interesting because they just were so precious about their work, which they have a right to be. It's their work. If they don't want it altered in any way, it's not going to become a film, And that was it.
That wouldn't be me.
That wouldn't be you, or would be?
No, it wouldn't be me.
Wouldn't be.
No,
okay.
Take it and let it fly.
Yeah.
Literally.
Well, I think so. I mean, I think authors can do both, can't they? I mean, can't you write some books that you say, look, these I want to leave exactly how they are because I'm very proud of them. I don't want them screwed around with by a script doctor in Hollywood. But this one I'll sell for, the big money, and they can do what they want with it. I think that's a good compromise.
I think you have to consider it a completely different product. I mean, when you think about a movie that's an hour and a half, and how long does it take you to read that book? 6 to 8 hours. So you can't possibly put everything from a book into a movie. You have to pick and choose. And I'm not sure I'm the best person as the author to pick and choose because they are all my favorite things. So I would much prefer to have somebody who knows what they're doing do it, and then there's a different product out there. It's not the same product. It's different. Hopefully it has the same flavor, and people will enjoy it.
Well, that makes sense. Yeah. Some people write books directly with the idea of it being a screenplay. And it's funny because I've written a couple of screenplays, but I've never written a novel, and it's totally different to write the two of them. One is a matter of using as many words as you can possibly use, and a screenplay is the absence of words. You want the minimal amount of words to express the situation, to kind of describe the situation. And I'll tell you, it's much more difficult for me because I can just go on and on writing. But with a screenplay, you've got to just the minimum, one sentence to do something that might take you 4 pages in a novel,
Oh, yeah. I investigated screenwriting a month or 2 months ago and investigated a little bit, thinking that, maybe I should try to do a screenplay for the first book, Secret Sky, and I didn't get very far with it. It's very hard. It's very hard to do.
Yeah, it is. The authors that I've talked to who have had some success with that usually get somebody in and work with them, somebody who knows how to convert your novel into a screenplay. And that works. But at the end of it, the authors often go, wow, how could you just describe this big, beautiful, detailed scene in like 2 lines?
Yeah.
Because the film is going to describe it, and it's going to be up to the director and the actors to create that environment visually rather than you're creating it written. So yeah, it's a whole different.
That whole idea that the picture, speaks 1,000 words. That's so true. And an actor or actress, just one expression on their face, that wipes out a couple paragraphs.
Absolutely.
Yeah. You just trust that the people that know what they're doing know what they're doing.
When you start thinking of it in those kind of terms, then it all makes sense. It starts to make sense why it's so minimal on a screenplay. Anyways, so we're just about out of time. We got about 2 minutes. Do you want to?
My goodness, that went by fast.
Yeah, it does. Your book is called what again?
Secret Sky. Secret Sky is the first of the book of the series, and it's an urban fantasy, and it's primarily about a woman who doesn't know she can fly until she falls from the sky.
Oh, well, that sounds interesting. Okay. Are you self-published, or do you go through a publisher?
I'm indie published right now, self-published, and the book that I have written that's not out yet, I'm actually shopping that around with agents. I'm hoping at some point to get a traditional deal.
To get a traditional deal, okay.
Yeah, I want to see what it's like on that side.
I've had both on this show, and I tell you, it's like a real coin toss. There's good and bad on both sides. It's really control versus less work, basically, is what I surmised.
Yeah. And I don't know. I mean, there are people that say, just stick with what you've done and but I think there are advantages to being traditionally published, and I'd like to enjoy some of them.
Well, like I said,
I would like to try it.
Yeah, you don't have to deal with everything. They do.
Yeah.
But the other one,
I agree.
The disadvantage I've heard from several people was that they wrote a book and then the publisher said, no, it's in too many genres. We need it cut down so that we can put it into one genre. So, like, I remember one, she said that she had to cut a lot of the romance scenes in the book because it was too much, and the book was going to be considered a thriller and not a romantic book. So they had to cut pages of the romance and things out. And
I can understand that. I publishers are selling to bookstores, and bookstores have to put those books on their shelves, and they don't have unlimited space, so they've got, a romance section, and they've got a historical fiction section, and they don't have the space to put the books in a historical romance section.
True. And a miscellaneous section probably wouldn't be the best marketing strategy.
I consider my books, they're urban fantasy primarily, but they're also thrillers, and they're supernatural. But where do you put them? And when you go into a bookstore, I'll find my books locally in bookstores in the science fiction section, and I'm thinking to myself, if I was looking for science fiction and picked this up, I wouldn't be interested. It should be probably where I don't know if they have a fantasy section that's separate. They generally don't, but maybe put it in the paranormal, even though it doesn't have a vampire or a werewolf in it. It better fits there than science fiction, but that's where it goes.
There used to only be about 5 genres, and now there seems to be a whole lot more.
It's like coffee. When you go into Starbucks now, it's not just decaf and calf.
Yeah, now I know.
You have to look at the board and study.
Too many choices, I think, is making us crazy as a society. I really do. Let's go back to just regular coffee and 5 genres in the bookstore.
Simpler. Much simpler.
Simpler times. What is your website that people can come check you out, check out your books? It's
jpmcleanauthor.com. P like Patricia.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show and talking. This was a fun chat. And
thanks for having me on.
Best of luck with your books and all your work.
Thanks so much. Let's both hope that COVID gets kicked to the curb soon.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, take care.
Thanks so much.
You're listening to Mr. Smooth and Savvy right here on the Douglas Coleman Show. We'll be right back after these commercial messages.
DJC Music and DJC Productions are pleased to announce a brand new website. We have started a listing website for radio show hosts as well as potential show guests. This is a meeting site where hosts and guests can come together. Show hosts can list their show and types of guests they're interested in booking. Potential guests can list their talents, bio, accomplishments, or anything they feel makes them an interesting radio show guest. There are no recurrent payments, only a one-time $5 listing fee. Your listing will stay up until you decide to cancel. Previous guests of The Douglas Coleman Show are welcome to submit their guest listing free of charge. Go to radiohostsandguests.com. That's radiohostsandguests.com.
Hi there, this is Stuart Epps, record producer. This is my story about Elton John, working with him in those early years, going back to 1967 at Dick James, all the amazing tours, those first recordings, going through to Rocket Records, and it's an amazing story about his incredible rise to stardom and my part in that. So look forward to taking you on that journey. So here we go. Yeah, and to order this great audio CD, please just email me at stuartepps@talk21.com. That's Stuart, Stuart, Epps, EPPS, at talk, TALK, 21 in figures.com. Stuart Epps at talk21.com. Email me and I'll give you all the details for buying this brilliant audio disc. Thank you, bye.
Love coffee, huh? But wait a minute. It seems like every time you finish a cup of coffee, you get all of these side effects along with it. heartburn, indigestion, upset stomach, acid reflux. As the world's first and only organic acid-free coffee, Tyler's Coffee is able to provide a healthier option in the solution for more than 100 million individuals who have sensitive stomachs or suffer from acid-related modalities. This is Tyler's acid-free coffee. Coffee without the consequences.
Hey, this is Ray Powers. Don't touch anything. You've got it right where you need it. Tuned in to the Douglas Coleman Show. You heard me.
Hi, this is John Morgan, production supervisor for DJC Productions. You're listening to the Douglas Coleman Show.
Okay, please welcome to the Douglas Coleman Show, Lou Bayer. Hi, Lou. How are you?
Hi, just fine, thank you.
Well, thank you for coming on this show. I appreciate it. Give us a little bit of your backstory. What exactly do you do?
Sure. So I'm really proud to be recognized as one of the leading experts on civility, and my niche area of interest is civility at work. So the last 30 or so years, I've been studying and researching and traveling and teaching and published 17 books on civility.
Okay. So tell us exactly what civility means in this context.
Sure. So I think a lot of people dismiss civility as a soft skill, something, sort of about manners or Martha Stewart perfection. And the fact is, civility is a measurable competency. It's a deal breaker in terms of engagement and retention. There's all sorts of validated research talking about how it's impacting profitability and the bottom line, workplace stress, workplace wellness. So it's actually an essential skill. It's not just about handshakes and using the right fork. And, civility is reading nonverbal cues. It's about cultural competence. It's about systems thinking. It's a pretty broad topic.
So are you actually going to various companies and doing lectures on this topic?
Oh, yes, most definitely. I personally travel about 300 days a year, and our new book is Manufacturing Civility, and it's geared towards the manufacturing sector. And so my co-author and colleague travels and teaches as well many days a month. There's a big demand for training in this sort of competency. I think we kind of get tied down with the technical aspects of our work, and we forget about the people side.
Well, because when I think of the definition of the word civility, the first thing that comes to my mind is to just be nice to each other. But that just seems a little too simple.
Right, and on the surface, if we would all just adopt an attitude to be nice to each other, that would be fantastic. But this day and age, trying to keep up with the pace of change and technology and 6 generations in a workplace, and however many identifiable genders we have now, and 50 culture backgrounds on average in every workplace, things are pretty complex. It's not as simple as just be nice. We don't know what other people perceive as nice as much as we used to.
For the sake of this conversation, let's assume that this encompasses a bit more than just be nice to each other. How do you go about teaching this in a corporate environment? And where do you start? Do you start with the management, or do you start with the employees?
Well, that's a great question. And I think most often the traditional approach is start with employees, but we would always start with leadership, because civility is something that people have to experience it before they can exhibit it. And if the supervisors and leaders in management who really control the day-to-day experience of an employee, they set the tone, they make the rules, they approve the policies. So if leadership is not on board in terms of recognizing that how you treat people matters, then it doesn't matter how many rules we put in place, how many instructions we give people. This is how you say hello. This is how you should email. These are words you shouldn't use. It doesn't matter how many rules you put in place if people don't actually feel respected, or if there's mistrust, among and across work teams.
Some of this just seems to me to be common sense and what is sort of considered acceptable behavior in a work environment. You don't insult people, you don't swear at people, but I'm taking that it's more than that. what you're talking about, yeah?
Well, I'll tell you what, if we could have it so that people, if the only thing they did was not insult people and not swear, that would significantly improve most people's day-to-day experience at work. You know, those little gestures go a long way, but, you know, at the end of the day, it's really about valuing people. So you may have experienced, I also, you said common sense, and I agree, but common sense is not common practice. But I would say that you've probably met people who are perfectly polite. They follow all the rules, you know, they show up on time, they dress appropriately. But when you engage with them, there's something about them that, you know, they're just not authentic. You don't trust them. You can tell that they're biased or racist or snobby or, you know, calculating or manipulative in their behavior. And, you know, you can be very polite and extremely uncivil at the same time.
Well, that's a good point. There are certainly those types of people. And I think we've all run into them at one point or another. How do you deal with somebody like that?
Well, I think increasingly I'm finding in our travel and work, wherever we happen to go in the world and across sectors, is that, you know, the world has changed a lot. And, you know, even just the way we raise children, the way we interact in social media, the way politicians and leaders behave, you know, increasingly there's not a lot of good role models. There's not a lot of good leadership. And it would seem to many there's not a good incentive or reward for being the best person you can be. You know, nice guys tend to finish last, it seems like, you know, in the world we live in these days. And so what I would say to people is, you know, try it. You know, just change your behavior, try to be kinder, be more respectful, and see what happens. Watch, you know, how your experience changes. Watch how people respond to you differently. You know, watch how, you know, people don't try to run you down when you're a few minutes late in a crosswalk, or, you know, watch that people pay attention to you and put their phone down. You know, it really takes some courage to lead the pack and, you know, make a conscious effort to change to more civil conduct. But I would say we're in the habit. I think most people don't realize how uncivil we are. We just accept it as normal, but it's impacting our mental health and our physical health, impacting our productivity. And a lot of people, when you sit with them and ask them, my sense is that they're ready for change.
Let me go back to something you said at the beginning, where you were referring to this very multicultural environment that we live in now, and how in some cultures certain things are considered okay and in certain cultures things are not, right? Is that one of the issues you deal with?
Most certainly. So, I mean, we take something as simple as eye contact or a handshake, or, you know, who do you greet first? The older person, the younger person, the man or the woman? You know, who gets to speak first in a meeting? Do you bring a gift, and do you open that gift when you're handed it? How do you use business cards? All the way up to, you know, is it appropriate for me to even say hello and ask how your family is? You know, is that too personal in some cultures? You know, everything from the way genders interact with each other to generational habits to, you know, business ethics. And, you know, in some cultures, a bribe is normal business practice. And we perceive that, in most of us in our North American culture don't perceive that as a very civil behavior, but in other cultures, it's just the norm. It's how you do business. So, I mean, it's a really broad topic, and once you get into it, there's an almost endless array of situations and contexts. And to your earlier point, common sense, we hope, prevails, but you really have to be a thinking person these days. And we're going to offend. You can't possibly know everything about every culture, so you also have to be a person who's present enough that you can note when you make an error, and then you can repair appropriately, so that we're not miscommunicating and holding grudges and, you know, starting civil wars and these kind of things. So it's a never-ending conversation, really.
Don't you think that the person who immigrated to the United States or to Canada, isn't it their responsibility to assimilate into the culture that they came to, rather than expect everybody to assimilate to the culture that they came from?
Yeah, so now this is a kind of a loaded question, and certainly a hot button topic. What I would say is that, from a civility point of view, we talk about respect being something that you should not ever have to earn. So if I come from another culture, I should be respected as a human being. I shouldn't have to, prove that I have value. But at the same time, we would say to people coming to other countries to reside, they need to be open-minded too and take on the culture to the best that they can. In different countries, for example, Canada, people have entitlements to keep their language and keep some of their cultures, but within the parameters of our law and legislation and so on. So I think it's on both sides, because we also find that in countries where we embrace openly differences, there's so much we can learn from each other, and really robust and interesting traditions, and in some cases some not just interesting but better ways of doing some things. And everybody's got something to teach everybody's got something to learn, and it's not just a live and let live. It's not that kind of rose-colored glasses approach, but what I would describe as a continuous learning approach. So just the same as I can't expect everybody who comes into my environment to immediately and happily and easily pick up and take on all of my values, all of my habits and customs and behaviors and so on, we do expect people to take on our certain aspects of how we live, right? Our politics and our law, and in some cases our aspects of our religion. It depends. I think we come into situations, it is our responsibility to know what we're coming into, and to the extent we can abide by expectations, right? But I think it goes both ways. I think sometimes people are automatically not giving respect to another human being because they're fearful of change and differences, or they anticipate that somebody's going to take something from them, or that there is an inherent bias or racism, and that's not civil either.
Well, that's true.
It's a messy conversation for sure.
It is. However, I think when you relate this to a work environment, the primary objective is the work, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So that has to be the common.
Expert,
that has to be the common bond.
Ahead,
I just said that has to be the common bond between everybody, regardless of where they came from or what they, what their religion is. Everybody is there for the same reason.
Yes, and that's one of the reasons, as an expert, my focus is workplace, because to me, it's very cut and dry. When you sign that work contract and you take on the guidelines and the culture of that workplace, you go in knowing what the expectations are. You signed on the line that you would wear that uniform, that you would follow those rules, and you can't just pick and choose after the fact what's comfortable for you and what's not. Again, within the parameters of what's allowable by labor law, the employer has some obligations, but for the most part, it's not about preference, it's about competence. And so coming into that environment, I better be ready. If I'm not comfortable with that organization's values and policies, then I shouldn't be working there.
Well, exactly. I think people need to take a little bit of initiative on their own self-respect, but understanding that they have to conform when they come to work, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you have to leave some of that at home when you come to work. You don't bring your problems to work. I mean, we've all been in environments where somebody was going through a divorce or they were having personal problems, and they just brought it all into work with them. That's no good either. If you're not, if you're not in the right mindset, you just shouldn't come into work that day.
I agree. Yeah, and I think part of the problem is that many employers, or at least the managers and supervisors who represent them, have not been trained or mentored such that they have the courage to have some of those difficult conversations and state, clearly what the expectations are and what the values are and what that looks like in practice. And we're, oftentimes we're a bit vague. We don't want to be too direct. We don't want to be bossy, and and as a result, it's hard to hold people accountable. this notion of political correctness gets in the way, I think, a lot in workplace.
Oh, that's a whole nother topic.
Mm-hmm.
That's a big Pandora's box. I guess the last question, and then we'll wrap it up, is in your experience with doing talks and meetings and things with corporations, manufacturing facilities, who is the more guilty party of incivility generally? Is it the management or is it the workers? Who's violating that concept more?
Well, this might get me into some hot water too, but for the most part, I think both parties are guilty, but I think that certainly they're accountable to each other. But I think in the workplace where the leadership, supervisor, manager, whomever, is really in the power position and makes the decisions and has the authority over the other, to me it's a bit like the parent-child. I can't. I think Fred Astaire. Fred Astaire said all those years ago that the hardest job kids face these days is learning good manners without seeing any. And, I feel it's a bit like that in workplace.
Do as I say, not as I do kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Mm-hmm.
Well, listen, we got to wrap this up. Thank you for coming on. Do you have a website you want to give out where the book is available?
Thank you, sure.
Personal website?
CivilityExperts.com. Yeah, thank you.
CivilityExperts.com. Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks very much for coming on.
Okay.